Lily was an 8-year-old girl with the sweetest smile. She had big, bright eyes full of wonder and a heart that could warm anyone's day. She loved being outside, feeling the fresh air, and listening to the laughter of other kids. Even though she had cerebral palsy and couldn't run and jump like the other children, she never let that stop her from enjoying life. On a warm afternoon, Lily's mother, Maria, took her to the park. It was one of Lily's favorite places. She loved the sound of birds chirping, the rustling of leaves in the trees, and the cheerful voices of kids playing on the swings and slides. Maria gently pushed Lily's wheelchair toward their usual spot near a large oak tree. The sun shone brightly, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Maria spread out a soft blanket on the grass and helped Lily onto it so she could sit and enjoy the view. Lily clapped her hands with excitement as she watched a group of children chase each other. Even though she couldn't join them, she felt happy just being there, taking in all the joy around her. Not far from where they sat, an older man rested on a wooden bench. He wore a simple suit and a hat, and his face had deep lines that showed he had lived many years. He held a book in his hands, but his eyes weren't on the pages. Instead, he quietly watched the world around him, taking in everything that was happening at the park. He noticed Lily and Maria, how the little girl's eyes sparkled with happiness, and how her mother looked at her with so much love. The man smiled to himself, enjoying the peaceful scene. Maria took out a small snack and handed it to Lily. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said with a warm smile. Lily giggled and took a bite of her favorite fruit. "Mommy, look. That boy jumped so high." Lily pointed toward the playground, where a boy was showing off his jumping skills on the monkey bars. Maria chuckled. "He sure did, sweetie. Maybe one day you'll try something fun like that too." Lily nodded excitedly. "Maybe I can go on the swings." "We'll find a way," Maria assured her, gently brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. As the two enjoyed their time together, other families walked by, some smiling at the adorable little girl. A few children even waved at her, and she happily waved back. For Lily, this was a perfect afternoon. But not everyone saw it that way. A woman standing near the park entrance watched them with narrowed eyes. She whispered something to a nearby police officer, pointing in their direction. The officer frowned and started walking toward them, his partner following close behind. The old man on the bench noticed the officer's movement and sighed, closing his book. He had a feeling something was about to happen, and he intended to keep watching. The warm afternoon continued, and the park was full of laughter and happiness. Children ran across the grass, chasing each other in playful games. Parents sat on benches, chatting and watching over their little ones. Birds flew overhead, and a few squirrels scurried up the trees, searching for food. It was a peaceful and beautiful day. Lily was enjoying every moment. She watched the children with excitement, her eyes following their every move. Her mother, Maria, sat beside her, smiling and enjoying the fresh air. She loved seeing her daughter happy. Not far from them, near the entrance of the park, a woman stood with her arms crossed. Her expression was serious, and she kept glancing at Maria and Lily. She whispered something to a nearby police officer, pointing directly at them. The officer, a tall man with a stern face, listened carefully. His partner, a younger officer, nodded in agreement. After a brief conversation, both officers started walking toward Maria and Lily. Their faces were unreadable, but their steps were firm. The woman who had spoken to them watched with a satisfied look, as if she had done something important. Maria noticed the two officers approaching and felt a slight worry in her chest. She wasn't sure why they were coming toward her, but she stayed calm. She had done nothing wrong, and she had no reason to be afraid. Lily, unaware of what was happening, continued watching the playground. She pointed toward a girl on the swings. "Mommy, look. She's going so high." Maria smiled and nodded. "She is. Maybe we can ask someone to help you try the swings too, sweetheart." Before Lily could respond, the officers stopped in front of them. Maria looked up, her smile fading slightly as she saw their serious expressions. "Good afternoon, Mom," the taller officer said, his voice deep and firm. "May we ask what you're doing here?" Maria blinked in confusion. "Excuse me." "We received a report about suspicious activity," the younger officer added, glancing at Lily before looking back at Maria. "Can you tell us why you're sitting here?" Maria frowned. "This is a public park. I brought my daughter here to enjoy the afternoon, just like everyone else." The taller officer nodded but didn't seem satisfied. "Do you have any identification?" Maria felt her hands tighten into fists, but she took a deep breath to stay calm. "Why do I need to show ID just for sitting in the park with my child?" Lily, sensing her mother's change in tone, looked up at her. "Mommy, what's wrong?" she asked in a soft voice. Maria forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just stay with me." The officers exchanged a glance. The woman who had spoken to them earlier was still watching, her arms folded, as if waiting for something to happen. Not far away, the old man on the bench noticed everything. He sighed and leaned forward slightly, his sharp eyes locked on the scene. He had a feeling this wasn't just a simple conversation, and he wasn't going to look away. Maria took a deep breath and looked at the officers. She could feel her heart beating a little faster, but she kept her voice calm. "I don't understand. What suspicious activity are you talking about?" The taller officer shifted slightly and glanced at his partner before answering. "We received a report that someone in the park was behaving strangely. We were told to check on the situation." Maria's eyebrows raised in surprise. "Behaving strangely? I'm just sitting here with my daughter, watching the kids play. How is that strange?" Lily looked up at her mother with innocent eyes, not fully understanding what was happening, but sensing that something was wrong. She held onto Maria's hand tightly, as if she didn't want to let go. The younger officer looked uncomfortable for a moment but quickly masked it with a neutral expression. "We just need to make sure everything is okay. Do you have any identification with you?" Maria sighed and shook her head. "I didn't bring my wallet. I wasn't planning on needing ID just to take my child to the park." The taller officer frowned. "We need to verify who you are, ma'am. We're just doing our job." Maria's patience was wearing thin, but she remained composed. "I'm here almost every week. I've never been questioned like this before. What exactly is the problem?" Before the officers could respond, Lily looked up at them and spoke in her small, soft voice. "Are we in trouble?" The younger officer hesitated, his expression flickering with uncertainty. For a moment, he seemed to realize how unnecessary this entire situation was. But before he could say anything, the woman who had made the complaint walked closer, arms crossed. "I told you," she said to the officers, her voice sharp. "It's not normal for someone like that to just sit here all day. People are uncomfortable." Maria's eyes widened. "Someone like what?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The woman shrugged. "You know what I mean." Maria clenched her jaw. "No, I don't. I'm a mother sitting in a park with my child, just like everyone else here." The taller officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're just trying to resolve this peacefully. If you could cooperate, we can move on." Maria let out a slow breath. "Cooperate with what? I've answered your questions. I've done nothing wrong." Lily looked at the officers with big, confused eyes. "Mommy, can we go home?" she whispered. Maria squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "Not yet, sweetheart. Just stay with me." The air around them grew tense. A few people nearby had stopped what they were doing and were watching the interaction. Some whispered to each other, clearly noticing that something wasn't right. On the bench, the old man slowly closed his book. His sharp eyes observed every detail of what was happening. His expression remained unreadable, but inside, he was already thinking about what he was going to do next. Maria could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she refused to back down. She held Lily close, her protective instincts stronger than ever. The woman who had called the officers stood nearby with a smug expression, as if she had done something right. The officers, however, seemed unsure of how to proceed. Lily looked up at her mother, confusion in her innocent eyes. "Mommy, why are they still here?" she asked softly. Maria forced a gentle smile, not wanting her daughter to feel scared. "They're just asking questions, sweetheart. Everything is okay." But deep inside, she was frustrated. Why was she being treated this way when all she was doing was spending time with her child? The taller officer turned toward the woman and asked, "Ma'am, what exactly did you see that made you call us?" The woman shrugged. "She's been sitting here for a long time, just watching. It didn't feel right." Maria let out a small, bitter laugh. "I'm watching my daughter enjoy the park, just like every other parent here. Is that a crime?" The woman crossed her arms. "It just looked suspicious." Maria's jaw tightened. "So, because I'm sitting with my child instead of running around, that makes me suspicious." The younger officer looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to another. He glanced at his partner, as if silently asking what to do next. The taller officer, however, still seemed determined to push forward. "Ma'am, we need to be sure there's no issue here," he said firmly. "If you could just—" Before he could finish, Lily's voice interrupted. "Are we bad people?" Her small voice was soft but clear, and for a moment, everything went silent. Even the woman who had made the complaint hesitated, looking slightly uncomfortable. Maria turned to her daughter, her heart breaking at the question. She cupped Lily's face gently. "Of course not, my love. You are the sweetest, kindest girl in the world." Lily looked at the officers, her eyes filled with innocent confusion. "Then why are they being mean to us?" The younger officer's face changed. He glanced at the people watching them, then at Maria, then finally at his partner. For the first time, he seemed to realize how this looked. The older officer, however, remained unmoved. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the park." Maria's eyes widened. "What?" "You're making people uncomfortable," he added, glancing briefly at the woman who had called them. Several people in the park who had been watching whispered to each other. Some looked shocked. A few even pulled out their phones and began recording. The tension in the air grew heavier. On the bench, the old man leaned forward slightly. His eyes were sharp, and his expression unreadable. He had seen enough, and it was time to step in. A heavy silence fell over the park. Maria couldn't believe what she had just heard. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being asked to leave. Her heart ached as she looked at Lily, who clung to her hand tightly. The little girl didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew something wasn't right. Maria took a deep breath and spoke calmly but firmly. "I am not leaving. This is a public park. My daughter and I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." The taller officer frowned. "Ma'am, we don't want to make this difficult. It would be best if you just cooperated." Lily looked up at her mother, her eyes wide with worry. "Mommy, I don't want to leave. I like it here." Maria squeezed her daughter's hand, her voice steady. "We're not going anywhere, sweetheart." More people in the park had started paying attention now. Some had taken out their phones, recording everything. A group of parents sitting on a nearby bench whispered among themselves, exchanging concerned glances. A father who had been pushing his child on a swing stopped and looked over, clearly troubled by what he was seeing. The woman who had made the complaint stood with her arms crossed, looking impatient. "See, they're making a scene now. I told you something was off." Maria turned to her, her voice calm but filled with strength. "The only person making this scene is you. I was sitting here, minding my own business with my daughter, and you decided that wasn't okay. Why?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then scoffed. "I was just trying to keep the park safe." Maria shook her head in disbelief. Safe from what? A mother spending time with her child. The younger officer looked around at the growing crowd. He saw the people recording, the parents whispering, the children staring in confusion. For the first time, Doubt flickered across his face. He turned to his partner. Maybe we should just leave it alone. The taller officer's jaw tightened. He clearly didn't like backing down. He looked like he was about to argue when a new voice suddenly spoke up. I think that would be a very wise decision. Everyone turned to look. The old man who had been sitting on the bench stood up. His posture was straight, his expression calm but firm. There was something about him that made people pay attention. The taller officer frowned. And who are you? The old man took a step forward, looking the officers directly in the eyes. Someone who knows the law very well. And from where I'm standing, I see a mother and child being harassed for no reason. I wonder how this will look when these videos start spreading online. The officers exchanged glances, suddenly looking less confident. The crowd murmured in agreement. The situation had just taken a turn, and the officers were no longer in control. The entire park fell silent as the old man stood his ground. There was something about the way he spoke, calm yet firm, that made everyone pay attention. Even the officers, who had been so sure of themselves moments ago, now looked unsure. The taller officer straightened his shoulders. Sir, this is official police business. I suggest you stay out of it. The old man didn't flinch. He looked at the officer with sharp eyes. Official police business. Is it official to ask a mother and her disabled child to leave a public park for no reason? He gestured to the people around them. Everyone here can see what's happening. Many of them are recording. Do you really want this to be the story that spreads? The younger officer shifted nervously. He looked at the crowd, then back at his partner. The tension in the air was thick. Even the woman who had made the complaint suddenly seemed uncomfortable, as if she hadn't expected things to go this far. Maria watched the old man, feeling a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She didn't know who he was, but in this moment, he was standing up for her and Lily when no one else had. Lily, still holding her mother's hand, looked up at the old man with curiosity. Who are you? She asked in her soft, innocent voice. The old man turned to her with a warm smile. Just someone who believes in doing what's right, little one. The taller officer took a deep breath, clearly realizing that they were losing control of the situation. We were just responding to a call. We had to check things out. The old man nodded. And now that you've checked, what exactly have you found? A mother sitting with her daughter, enjoying the park. Is that a crime? The officer said nothing. The younger one looked even more uncomfortable now, as if he wanted to disappear. The old man continued, his voice steady. You see, I know a thing or two about how things work. I know that right now, people are watching. Phones are recording. And if you don't walk away, this moment will not be forgotten. The taller officer looked around. The crowd had grown larger. Parents, children, joggers, people from all over the park were watching. The pressure was rising. Finally, the younger officer sighed. He looked at Maria. Mom, you're free to stay. We won't bother you anymore. The taller officer clenched his jaw, clearly unhappy, but realizing he had no choice. Let's go, he muttered to his partner. Without another word, the two officers turned and walked away. The woman who had started it all gasped. Wait, what? You're just going to leave? The taller officer didn't answer. They kept walking, leaving her standing there, stunned. Maria let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked at the old man, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, she said softly. He smiled. No thanks needed. Just glad to see justice done. The park slowly returned to normal. But no one would forget what had just happened. Maria sat still for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Lily leaned against her, her small fingers still wrapped around her mother's hand. The officers had left, but the emotions from the encounter still lingered in the air. People in the park slowly returned to their activities, but some parents still watched Maria with sympathetic eyes. A few even nodded at her, as if silently offering their support. The woman who had caused the trouble stood frozen for a moment, clearly upset that things hadn't gone her way. With an annoyed huff, she turned and walked away, disappearing down the park path. Maria took a deep breath and turned to the old man who had helped them. "I really don't know how to thank you," she said sincerely. The old man chuckled. "No need for thanks, young lady. Some things are just worth standing up for." Lily looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you a superhero?" she asked curiously. The old man laughed, his face softening. "Not quite, little one. But sometimes all it takes to do the right thing is to speak up when others don't." Maria smiled, feeling a sense of warmth in her heart. She had never expected a stranger to step in and defend her like that. "But who are you?" she asked, still curious about him. The old man hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much to say. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small badge. It was old but still gleamed in the sunlight. Maria's eyes widened. "You were a police officer?" The old man nodded. "Retired now, but yes, I served for many years." He looked toward the path where the officers had walked away. "And I know when officers cross the line." Maria couldn't believe it. No wonder he had spoken with such confidence. He knew the law, and he knew right from wrong. Lily smiled brightly. "That means you were a real hero." The old man chuckled again. "Maybe once upon a time. But today, I was just a man who saw something unfair and decided to do something about it." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had felt so alone in that moment. But now she knew that there were still good people in the world. People who would stand up for what was right, even when they didn't have to. She reached out and gently shook the old man's hand. "Thank you," she said again, meaning it more than ever. The old man nodded before checking his watch. "Well, I should be heading home. But you and your daughter enjoy the rest of your day. You belong here just as much as anyone else." Maria smiled and watched as he walked away, disappearing into the park. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, can we stay a little longer?" Maria nodded, her heart lighter than before. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's enjoy the park." Maria and Lily stayed in the park for a while longer. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the playground. Children continued to laugh and play, their joy filling the air. The tension from earlier had faded, replaced with a sense of peace. Maria sat on the bench, watching her daughter happily push her toy car along the pathway. She felt relieved, but also deep in thought. Today had been a hard day, but it had also shown her something important. There were still good people in the world, people like the old man who had stood up for them. A woman with short brown hair, who had been watching everything earlier, walked up to Maria with a kind smile. "I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for what happened to you today," she said softly. "It wasn't fair." Maria was surprised but grateful for her words. "Thank you," she said, offering a small smile. The woman nodded. "A lot of us saw what happened, and it wasn't right. If you ever need support, you're not alone." Maria felt warmth in her heart. She had come to the park just to enjoy time with her daughter, but today had become something bigger. It had reminded her that standing up for herself and her child was always the right thing to do. As the woman walked away, Lily ran back to her mother, giggling. "Mommy, I made a new friend. Her name is Emma, and she likes my toy car." Maria smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Lily climbed onto the bench beside her mother and leaned her head against her shoulder. "Mommy, that old man was really nice. Do you think we'll see him again?" Maria thought about it and smiled. "Maybe. But even if we don't, we'll always remember what he taught us today." Lily nodded, her little hands playing with the edge of her dress. "He said we belong here. That means we can always come back, right?" Maria kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Yes, sweetheart, we can always come back." As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Maria felt lighter. The world could sometimes be unfair, But there was always kindness, always hope. She held Lily close, cherishing this moment. Tomorrow was a new day, and they would keep moving forward together.